everyone, let's paint a seascape in gouache. First thing we're going to do is we're going to do an underpainting. I used satin glazing liquid along with the golden fluid acrylics. It is a quinacridone azo yellow gold. It's a beautiful color. I decided to use warm undertones since it is a seascape. The way light works, this gold is the complementary color to blue, and it will still peek through even though the gouache is opaque. It will still peek through in spots and give a level of depth to it, a little bit more warmness. You could use any color you wanted, actually. You could even use blues again, but this also helps break up the white paper so that you're not feeling intimidated by all this white space. Now, if this was going to be a landscape scene where I had trees or grasses, water, things like that, I would do a more detailed underpainting. I would paint in the shapes of the trees in a darker value, wherever there was going to be bushes or grass, or even if you're painting a path, you would just get all your values in now, which means your lights to your darks. But for this painting, we're just using gold and just straight on because it is going to be a seascape, and I don't need all those shapes right now. I am going to be using the Himi, I'm not sure how you say it, Gouache Paints. Unfortunately, the set of whole beans I've had them for 2 years, never had any issues, but when I opened them up today, they had mildew, and I had to just throw it away. I tried to scrape it off, it didn't work, it still smelled bad, and I didn't want to risk it contaminating any of my other paints. So I threw it out and I went to my Himi set here. Any kind of gouache will work. There's all sorts of beginner sets. Meeden makes a great one. Himi, of course, and they all cost about $20. I did get that spray, which is to prevent bacteria and mildew growth. I didn't have it before, but I'm going to use it now. This is the Himi set I have. It is the Twin Jellies. So when you open it up, it's got quite a few color choices. They're really creamy and nice to work with. And this is the Twin Jellies, so it just kind of breaks up. You get different tones and values with it. I do want to note that that kind of yellow looking liquid that you see sitting on top, that is not that the paint has gone bad or anything like that. That is just the binder, gum arabic, and I had not mixed up the paints yet. Usually I just use a toothpick or something or a palette knife, and you mix them all up before you use them. The same thing happens with watercolor paints, oil paints. You get that in oil paint, though, it's an oil, but watercolors, the gum arabic can separate, and you just mix it up. Nothing's wrong with your paints. The underpainting is an acrylic, so it dries very quickly. I am using this on paper. I've taped the edges because I like a clean border, and then it helps keep the rest of the pad from getting paint over it where it spills and stuff. The paper I'm using is just the Fluid 100. You can get it from Blick, off YouTube, Amazon, and it's fairly cheap. I think this was about $5. It's good paper though still, especially to learn on, and you could even use it for pastels. You get an acrylic clear gesso, the clear one, not the white one, and it adds like a sandy texture to the surface. So it's perfect for acrylics, for watercolors, for gouache, even your oil pastels or pastels. You just have to put gesso or something else under that. So this one little pad, depending on what medium you want to use, can go a long way. And it's fairly cheap, but it's still quality paper. It does come in a glue bound pad, so the paper's not going to move around. It's not going to buckle. You don't have to take it off first and then tape it down to your board or anything like that. It is convenient. I do like that. And I can just keep it on the pad here and then do that. This watercolor paper, there's other ones too. If you wanted to go more expensive, you could use your Fabriano, your Arches. They all come in pads, but to just starting out, if you're a starting out artist, this is perfect. I still use it, especially when I'm just playing around and trying to test out different things and try new things. It's still quality paper. It's archival, it's acid free, and it's just more cost friendly when you're starting out. And it has tons of different uses depending on if you put gesso on it or anything like that. One thing to note though, for watercolor paper, I'm not a huge fan of it. I like the 100% cotton, just because when you're using salt textures or moving the water around, or you paint wet and wet, it can withstand a little bit more scrubbing. It's thicker paper. It's just a lot easier to work with. So when it comes to watercolor, I would say spend the money on the paper. It's worth it in the end. You can get a 9x12 pad and cut them into little miniature paintings. It's a great way to learn and not feel like you're wasting paper. You just divide it up into little 3.5 by 2.5 size mini paintings, and it's a great way to practice every day too. And you don't feel like you have this huge sheet or a canvas that you have to fill up each day. So, you can take and just paint like a little tree if you want to practice trees, and it's a 5-10 minutes out of your day, and you still got your painting in. And then if you mess up, it's not a big waste either. You can just do this. If you were painting in watercolor, don't like it, go over it with gouache or acrylics or oils, or just flip it over and start with watercolor on the clean side. So let's get to painting. I'm taking a piece of artist tape. You can get this on Amazon, or you can even use the washi tape. I like using washi tape. It's cute and fun. It does not peel up your paper. This artist tape is also really good, especially if you want to see your borders. If you're using really thin borders there, I can see underneath. So that's the only reason I use the clear stuff here. I'm taping it for the horizon line, and of course it's crooked. I'm not so particular. I'm going to grab out a ruler and make sure it's all even and everything. I really want to paint. So I'm applying that there. The one thing that you do want in your paintings to be straight is the horizon. If it's not, and it's the same rule applies in photography, the picture will feel off to the human eye. Since there's no rolling hills and this is a seascape, we do need that level horizon. And I'm taping it so that not only I get the level horizon, but I want to separate the sky from the base layers once I start building in the water. And then what I'll do is I'll remove that tape and we'll move it up when we're painting the water down below to protect what we've painted up top. So let's get to painting. Now this is the Himi 48 color set. And the first color that I'm starting out with is the shallow crab color. And I do like how the orange is showing underneath and it's a kind of bluish gray color, but it turns it green, which I knew was going to happen with that gold underneath. Now I am using the number 6 flat brush that came with it, just because I wanted to stick if somebody else got this kit or another starter kit. They usually don't come with the bigger, broader brushes and stuff like that. So I'm trying to use what came with this set just to make it easier on supply list for you. Now gouache is watercolor. It's just more opaque. And some of them have a different additive, an additional additive. It might seem a little chalky, but typically it's just more opaque because the binder is still gum arabic, but the particles are usually just thicker. They're not ground as finely as watercolor is. Some of the really cheap paints add a lot of chalk to it, and I don't really like those, and you'll probably end up more frustrated than not with it. So like this Himi brand is about 20 bucks. Meeden has one for 20 bucks, and they're really, really good gouache. They are archival and stuff like that. So it's not going to be this, it won't work the same way as a professional one like whole bean or anything there. But these are still very creamy, very pigmented, and lots of fun to work with. Being water-based, you still will mix it with water. Now with gouache, you don't want to go a big impasto style or really thick like you would with acrylic or oil, because it will dry and it could crack. Gouache is also more matte. It dries matte, whereas watercolor tends to be a little bit more glossy or vibrant. You'll see gouache used a lot in illustration because the way it can cover in such a smooth way when it's painted that way, and it's because it's matte, it's easy to photograph, easy to scan. You don't have to worry about glare and stuff like that. It's just it's a fun medium to work with. It is different than watercolor, whereas watercolor you work light to dark. in gouache, it's like working with acrylics or oils. You work dark to light. I've painted in my sky here. I'm not really sure about the colors right now. I kind of like the gold showing through, but I have a different vision in mind. I don't want big clouds or anything, but we'll see. I'm just going to let this dry and let it sit and move on to the foreground and the midground here. And if I want to, I can come back and I can redo that top part or fix it the way I want. I am a self-taught artist. I've been painting for about 13 years on and off, mainly doing photography for a while, and that took up a lot of my time. Aside from my 9-to-5 job, which isn't 9 to 5, but I get up at 6, or I start work at 6. But I am a revenue cycle analyst for a big hospital. And this is the Himi color chart. Lots of fun. The colors look different in the palette though than they do on this sheet. So just a forewarning there. So I'm in no way an expert. I paint for fun and by intuition a lot of the time. I know the basics. I followed YouTube tutorials over the years and then just experience painting. This is a book I recommend. It's a complete color harmony. It actually shows you a lot of different color combinations, different colors you might not normally use or think of, and how, you know, the mixes work. This one cost, I think it was about $20 on Amazon. It was totally worth it. If you're in a rut and you can't think of anything to paint, you can just go through here and look at a color combination and then put it together. So that's always a help for a creative outlet too as well. It's a really nice little book and easy to carry around. And again, I got it on Amazon. And some other things. We're not going to get into color theory now, but these color wheels, they're also like about $10 on Amazon. These are invaluable to you. They show you your split triads of complementary colors, color mixing. If you want a certain shade of pink, what colors do you put together? Add white or add black. These are different wheels for different things. I have 3 different ones, and you flip it over and the other side's got the just normal color wheel, and you spin these around. They're totally worth it like this. This shows all your values and where you would add white or when you add black, like that violet. And it also shows you your complementaries. So as you can see with the blue, the complementary color is the gold. And that just means that it will bring out the blue more. So these are fun little things. They're not expensive, but they are an invaluable tool, especially if you don't have a lot of color theory background. They can help you out a lot. And then this is the other one, and this just shows values, especially if you're working monochromatic or you're needing a lighter color of one so that you can kind of get a basis. You start out with your green and then you can go lighter, how many shades you can get. It's sometimes visual is easier for people than just guessing it when you're mixing your paint on your palette. We're not going to be mixing any paint. I'm trying to keep it straight out of the little jelly cups to make it easier for anybody watching that's not experienced. And then I even have like this fun little, it's a pin, or you can get a keychain. I also have the keychain, and it's a color wheel that I put on my travel palette for my watercolors, and I can just carry it with me. And it's a simplified version of the other wheels, but sometimes it can help me. Oh, what was the complementary? And then I carry like my water pens in here, a pink or an orange watercolor pencil that I sketch with. But I also have one on a keychain. And they're just helpful to reference if you're looking for, you know, what colors go together. Helps you not make muddy colors as much. And again, Amazon, I think it was like $10 for a set of 2. And they could also make neat little gifts for people too. And then this color wheel is the back of one of the other ones. It shows you your color wheel there. And it also has like the gray there so that you can see values. And you can put this up against your painting if you're struggling with some values, darks and lights, to make things pop. It's helpful when you're mixing colors. So again, these are an invaluable asset and tool to have in your arsenal. All right, so let's get back to painting. I've sat on this for a while, let it dry, and I don't know about it yet. Maybe if it was going to be a less colorful scene or like a more moody piece, I'd want that gold coming through more, especially for like a landscape. But the seascape is going to be more colorful. So I already know that I will go up and go over that. I just want to work in some of my foreground and then check it afterwards. So we're going to remove the tape now. And then I'm going to move it up above, since I'll be painting darker values of the colors now. I'm going to be going in with an ultramarine, and I don't want to paint over that lighter color. Do you have to do that? No, but I don't have super steady hands, and I can't draw a straight line, so I use tape. I tend to be a work smarter, not harder type of person. And if you can't draw a straight line and you don't feel like carrying a ruler or anything like that, then tape is your best friend. So I'm going to go in with an ultramarine here. I thought it might be too dark, and as I am putting it down, I realize it is darker than what I wanted, but the beauty of this paint is that you can go through and you can lighten these up. So you do want the horizon to be darker, but I feel like it's just going to be too dark for what I want as I move along. This is my first time using these colors, so they are a little different than in other mediums or other paint sets I've had. So some ultramarine is not always the same across every medium and every even every gouache type. I'm going to stick through with this ultramarine, and then because I know I can lighten it up later, but it may be the value that I want. It just looks darker than what I'm thinking right now. I'm loving the way it interacts with the gold underneath. It is causing that kind of sea green because the ocean is not actually blue. It just looks blue due to our atmosphere. But you can always see the greens and stuff like that, especially on the West Coast. Now I'm coming in with the color that they call powder blue. It's very light. And I'm just going to mix that in there. I do know that my light is going to be coming across my waves from the top to the bottom right there in the center. And then I'm just kind of fanning it out into the other colors. There's some cobalt blue I've added over that ultramarine, and I like how that's mixing. Now using that same powder blue, I'm coming underneath it. It's watered down more, not as thick. There is an acrylic underpainting, so I don't have to worry about any of that gold coming up. I am kind of blending it and working it into the blue up above. Now gouache does dry fast, but not quite as fast as like acrylic. And the nice thing about it is even if I came back later, I could walk away from this. I could come back, you can re-wet that and blend those together more. So you don't have to worry about it. If you get interrupted or anything like that, somebody comes to the door, you can pause in between. Unlike acrylic, where you need to get the blending done unless you're using a medium that slow dries or an open acrylic, which adds a little bit more time, but not as much as watercolor or gouache does. And I just use a paper towel. I rinse off my brush and wipe off the excess paint and then put it through the water to clean it off. I'm not using two jars of water. Simply because it's primarily blues and the color mixes that I want. I'm not worried about the color of the water as it starts to darken up and get the blue rinses contaminating anything. But I would strongly suggest probably using 2 cups of water, one for rinse and then one for just you have clear water to wet your brush with and start painting with. And again, this is still that sky blue, or powder blue, I'm sorry, and just mixing it in and working down. And then now I'm actually grabbing, it's called, on their thing, it's called Spring Cyan. It's kind of a greenish color. It's really pretty color, actually. This is kind of when it's nice to have, more colors than you normally would use. You don't have to worry about trying to mix that color on the spot, which would literally be a blue and some yellows, maybe a touch of green. And I'm just working my way down. This is my middle ground. I'm using, again, the brush that came with it. Normally, I would probably use a thicker brush or width-wise. This is just a number 6. It's a little narrow thing, but since we're working on a smaller space and I plan on having those smaller brush strokes show through, I'm just using it. And then for ease with anybody following, that's the brush that they have that came with this kit, and that's what they're using. So we're still working through the spring cyan, bringing it down. This is going to be my middle ground. And I'm just kind of painting intuitively. Like I said, I'm not using a reference photo. I just kind of paint by feel. It's how I like to paint. This is my process. You can do however you like. If you wanted to use a bigger brush and thicker brush, you could. If you wanted to use a round brush, you could. Use what you have available. And again, I'm not worried about these being perfectly gradiated. I do know that I'm going to be going over with different layers and colors to fill in some of those spots where you see the gold showing through a lot. And here I'm just kind of outlining now the shape of the breaking wave that I'm going to have here and where the foam is going to be. I'm just kind of crisscrossing back and forth. And I'm still using water with it. And if it gets too thin, just tap your brush on the paper towel. You can use anything actually. You can use this old sponge. I use microfiber cloths a lot because they're easy to wash afterward, especially with like my pastels. But paper towels, anything you have work. A sponge can help as well, damp sponge. So I've got this middle ground in there, and it's pretty much the base color that I want. I may decide to go darker with that, but first we're going to start putting in the darker values. Normally, when I work, I will work my darkest values, get them all blocked in first, but this time I'm just doing it a little bit different. I'm not sure why. I've only painted 3 seascapes in my life. One was 13 years ago in acrylic, and then a couple days ago in watercolor I did a tiny painting. So I just wasn't sure what order I should go in with it, but I decided to work top to bottom, especially since I was videotaping this, and to keep my hands from getting up there working on the top and dipping my hands into the bottom where it's wet, having to wait on dry times as much. So this was an ultramarine blue. I went in fairly dark, and you can see where with that gold underneath, where it thins out a little bit, it does give that undersea green color, and I really, really love that. And again, here's the color chart. And I'm still blocking in with the blues now. Now I'm adding, it's that powder blue again. And I'm just kind of filling in the gaps. And since I'm pulling some of that ultramarine with it, it's mixing right there on the paper. It's not as light. And then I'm going to switch it up to a little bit darker color. It's a Jinqde, Jinqde. I cannot say that word, but that's the color here. And then an acid blue. And I'm just going back and forth with those, lighter to darker, and working my way through. As I get closer to the middle there, this is where I want these waves to be meeting and to have some definition and height there in the middle. So I know that those shades are going to be lighter, more light will be shining through it. So it will get more green and yellow in value versus the edges and the bottoms and underneath the foam where the shadows would be. So I'm just kind of working out some shapes. I'm keeping my brush in the direction of different water. This is supposed to be turbulent water right here in a wave. And I'm just kind of right now, I'm trying to just see what my shapes, what I want it to be. Again, I did not sketch this out. I'm just working intuitively here. And as I go, and I change these up. Now we're going in with that really light, I think that one is powder blue. And now I'm kind of defining more of those highlights on the waves and where it breaks, and you get those foam lines. And now I'm just going in and I'm starting to give some shape to the water here. And if you're a person that likes to sketch things out and you need that, you can most definitely do that. it does make it easier sometimes. Sometimes I just like to move the paint around and see what I can do. This is a great time, and especially on this size of paper or even a smaller one, to just experiment. And that's what this is. So an artist that regularly paints these may have a way better process than what I do, but this is what works for me, especially if I'm just trying to relax and just paint intuitively. Because sometimes you just got to have a little fun with it. Not everything has to be all pre-planned and done. Now you see me bringing it down at an angle because the water is going to be meeting up there in the middle and then kind of spilling back over towards the edges of the painting. So I'm just kind of giving some direction there. And slowly building my layers because that's what gives depth. The ocean and other things are not just one color. So this is where you start adding your lights and your darks, your different colors. Again, I'm just building them up slowly. And on this layer, I will mix them more, and I tend to spread them out and blend it a little bit more. I do know as I go on that I will start getting thicker and letting the brush strokes show more. I like seeing texture. If you're not a texture type person, by all means, blend these out. There's nothing wrong with that. While I may not have planned this, I do know in the end, in my brain here, what I want it to look like and where I kind of want to go with this painting. I actually was born and raised in California and grew up in Orange County. And so we were at the beach all the time. And here in Illinois, we don't have any beaches, so I kind of miss that. But I really don't have a lot of practice painting those because I was away from there once we started. So now I'm going to go in with this. This one's called Shallow Crab. That's a funny name, but it's cute since it's a seascape. And then, you know, like I said, it looks different in the little jelly than it does on their palette card color. So a lot of times what you should do is go through and take all these paints and then on a blank sheet of paper, go ahead and take each color and use it and spread it out and make your own color chart. And then you get an idea of what the colors actually look like and when you're using them on their own, because they don't exactly match a photograph. And I'm just still building this lighter to darker. And now still adding a little bit of lines. Moving direction where I know I'm going to highlight this later. I'm using both the side of my brush and then the flat part of it. And since it is water-based, you know, if I make a mistake here, I don't like something, you can easily paint over that, or you can wet your brush a little bit and you can pull some of that up. Now you have to be very careful, or you can pull up the entire layer below it. But playing around like this is where you really get to know the paint and how much water, your water control, how much pressure, what you can do without completely lifting up the paint and disturbing the bottom. This one I did not let the bottom dry completely. I did want it to mix with the other colors. So I was able to use a little bit lighter than I would normally go because it's mixing with the darker ultramarine down below. All right, so now we're going back to that powder blue. And I'm going to start working up in this midsection here in the top of this wave, working in where the foam's going to be. And I'm not going in with white because I want to save that for later. Right now I'm just trying to get some values in here. If you went in with white right now, it would look nice because it's a big highlight color, but later on, once you finished everything else, it would not be a highlight, and you cannot go lighter than white. So you want to use still some muted colors and slowly build up to those highlights and your lights, and that's how you make them pop. And it doesn't look like much right now, but eventually we'll start getting that in there. And I may, because we still have that middle ground there to go and get those colors, I may end up going in with a little bit more blue and defining around that wave crest a little bit more. We'll see when I get there. And now I'm, seeing things here. My ADHD keeps me moving through mediums and then just all over around a painting. I see something and then I want to fix it, or while I'm allowing something else to dry, like that top part. Okay, and now I'm going in, it's that same powder blue. And just kind of pulling this over. I don't know, I don't like this top part, the very horizon line. I think it's still too dark once I got that cyan in there. And so we're gonna lighten that up a little bit. We'll spread it around. I'm gonna work a little bit more on this middle ground here. Now we're just getting some kind of shapes here. Yeah, and I've decided I'm definitely gonna lighten up that blue in the background. It's just a little bit too harsh. And pulling some of it down into the cyan and into the middle ground there. And again, you cannot make a mistake. If you went too light with it, you can always go back in with some ultramarine or pull it back. Now, you don't want to get too many layers because eventually, the gouache will get too thick and crack, but you can even wet your brush and pull it up a little bit. These are the hardest stages in a painting because it's so ugly. I actually gave up watercolor for a while because you'd get to this really ugly stage. It wasn't doing what I wanted, and I was following a tutorial, and I was like, okay, I just can't paint. And I remember in grade school, my teacher telling me, I think it must have been about 4th grade, coloring with the girls. Nobody wanted me on their team if it came to a contest because I didn't color in all the lines. You know how you would take like the crayon and you'd go right along the line of the coloring book or whatever and outline it all nice, and then you'd have all the nice shading in the middle. I couldn't do that. I went in and I just, I colored outside the lines. I like to mix colors together, not just one color in each section. So I didn't get picked for too many of those contests. And then I remember my teacher telling me I was not going to be an artist ever. And unfortunately, and hopefully that's changed now, we all just have our different styles and ways of going about things, different processes. But these ugly stages are hard to get through. But once you realize you keep putting it in and just doing your layers and taking your time and building it up, it ends up really, really beautiful. It's the patience of building these up. I think sometimes when we see a painting, we think they're just using one color and they're just dabbing it on and they have perfection. And it's not that way. These are built up in layers. Even watercolor washes, these artists, you're using really light washes and then coming in with your darks and stuff. It's about patience with this. Gouache is a little more forgiving because it's opaque and you can paint over it. We're going to leave it alone and just finish with unlike watercolor. If you started light to dark, that wouldn't work because it may end up I get these in and it actually unless you're going over it with an ink or just from experience and now I'm just starting to paint some of these little caps. It's way too exactly sure of the correct, especially since I'm going with such a light white caps that you see when you're looking out over the ocean. And again, I'm using that, it is their powder blue, not white yet. And as I'm putting in this powder blue, I'm in my head right now, I'm thinking that I probably need to work on the values, bring in some more darks in that middle ground. The cyan is not popping the way I thought it would, which is normally why you put in all your darks, so that you can actually see your values as you go lighter. And now I'm just kind of pulling a little bit of that blue into the cyan down there by that bottom wave. And then I'm adding more powder blue. I'm trying to form out where I'm going to have the big foam area. And I'm just kind of thinking through. I'm just patting. And here I am using a little white mixed with that powder blue. And I'm just kind of patting it in spots. I use the side of the brush, the corner of the brush, and you just kind of dot it in. And again, you know, that's still too light, or it's too dark up there. So now I'm going to go in with that Jink side color again. It's this one. I'm not sure. It's kind of a darkish blue-green. And then I've also got the pale blue and that shallow crab again that I'm going to use. So these are the two colors I'll be using here. So now I know I need to start working on some more values in here. I'm adding kind of a cobalt blue in there. I know this needs to be lighter. That's where the light is going to be hitting it. So it should be like a lighter green. And I'm just deciding right now, do I want to use their pre-made or a yellow? And I think I'm going to go with that. It's almost a lime green. The color that they call it is yellow green. And it's actually a really pretty color. I'm using really thin washes. I'm just kind of going over spots. I want to keep down where that ultramarine is, keep that pretty dark, because those will be the shadows, and then right under the cap where the foam is. And then now I'm using a little bit of that pale blue and then some of that green, and just mixing it on the paper and moving it around, because I do definitely want that middle portion there to be a lot lighter, and then going out into the darker blues. This is supposed to be kind of turbulent, where the wave is crashing and the water is moving around. And as it comes up to the surface there, it's thinner, so more light is shining through it, so you get those lighter greens. Right now I'm thinking I probably will start adding some yellow in there, go over it lightly. Still just kind of feeling my way through this. Working up my light values slowly. And then if I accidentally go over a part where I wanted to keep it dark, I just go in and I paint that back in, rinse off your brush. But I definitely, the center part now, I know that we're going to be adding a little bit more dimension and color here. I want to make sure that we still have movement in this. I'm going to remove this top part now because I want that bottom part to dry. The sky is really bothering me now that I have more down at the bottom done. And this section here. So first I'm going to fix this. I definitely know I want to go lighter with this now that I have some of my darkest values down at the bottom. I really don't like that stark dark blue there. So I'm just adding a little bit of that powder blue. And like I said, my brush is wet, so it is pulling up that bottom layer of ultramarine and blending with it as I go too. And then I'm kind of pulling it down a little bit into that cyan. And I'm actually liking that a lot better. Yeah. And I'm using a dry brush, basically, or a little bit on my brush there. See how it's on the end here? And I'm just kind of like dragging it across and rolling my brush because I do want a little bit of texture here to show these little white caps. And you can just drag it along. As you paint, you'll get used to how the different brushes work and how the paint moves. And this is a little bit drier, and when you hold the paintbrush like this and you come across it, will drag just a little bit of the white that's on the brushes, but it won't spread it out and make it uneven. It gives that dry brush appearance. So there's a little bit of texture. And you can do the same thing in watercolor on a white area of your sheet. If you don't want to fill it all the way in with color, you can go across with a darker color. And now this is where I am using a little bit of white mixed in with that powder blue. I'm trying to bring up these values. I know this is where my light is going to be coming across. I want this to be my lightest part in the center, like where the sun would be hitting. And since it isn't a sunset scene, I'm using traditional like daylight colors, which is just the blues and lighter blues. So I'm still building this in and then pulling it down a little bit and going outward with it. You know, a little bit that texture and the colors going. And then I'm going to come back in here and add some more blue, a little bit of darker tone to the top of that wave. I do want to define it. I need to separate it from that foreground more. It did blend in more than what I wanted. But it's an easy fix. And now I am adding a lighter mix. It has more white with that powder blue than white, but it is not completely white, because I will be coming in with the white later. And here I want to leave the texture. I don't want to blend it out completely. I'm just kind of crisscrossing with my brush, the flat end of the brush there. Okay, so we're gonna work on that sky now, because it's time. It is driving me crazy. It does not fit in with the rest of the painting yet. And now that I have most of my values established, I know I don't want to keep that gold there. It makes it look a little bit muddy. I want to brighten up that sky and cover more of that underpainting. So I'm just going in. Clouds used to be so hard. And I'm not going to describe how to paint them here. I just move the paint across. It seems like if I think about it, then I fail at them. And sometimes once you start doing clouds and you practice with them, it just clicks. And you just intuitively, you stop worrying about perfect shapes and everything like that, and you just start painting on them. You know what you want. And for this, I don't want the clouds to be the focal point, because that's going to be the wave crashing down at the bottom in the foreground. So pretty simple things. And while I'm thinking about that, I'm going to go in and I'm going to start adding some more yellow and start working on my light here before I mess with the sky. I just want to get some of my lighter values down here, and let's see, because the sky may be fine, but I'm thinking probably not. It just doesn't seem to mix or mush well. That looks like more like on a landscape or a foggy and more grays and stuff. That background would on the sky would do better with that orange showing through. But for this, it's just not working. But we're going to come down here. We're going to finish some values here, adding more of the yellows. Now I'm getting brighter with them and more streaky, letting the brush strokes show, not blending it as much. And in other areas, I am blending it out. And if you're painting, do it however you want. If you want them all blended out and smooth, you can most certainly do that. Again, I like the texture, and I like that separation. So I'm just going in now and just building the depth and the personality of this water and the waves to give it some dimension and some movement. And painting is really just darks and lights and getting your shadows in the right places. You paint what you see, literally, when it comes to darks and lights. And then you add those layers of colors, and the next layer over it will shine through and you get this dimension of color. Because if you go out and look in nature, green is not just green. There's yellows, purples, blues. I think photography and getting into landscape photography helped me see so much more out in nature than I used to, and really, really has helped my painting. Because I used to just paint with a green and then a lighter green and think, wow, this, I can't get it to look the way it looks. Well, that's because color is more advanced than just one color. It's got so many dimensions to it. So still just building this up and starting to get that crust, and now I'm working on just the movement to make this water feel alive and some energy to it. And we're outlining some of the caps here. It's like what you would see when you're at the ocean. And I'm not using white yet. I'm still using that powder blue. And just kind of going along and getting some of the water moving to foam. The way it crashes, you get that foam in those lines and the very crest of these top of the waves. And lightening up spots here and there. Again, I'm just kind of doing it by feeling. It may not be, let's see, I want to say anatomically, but that's not the right word. It may not be the perfect way or how it actually is supposed to be, but for me, I want that impression and that feeling. And when you look at it, you see these waves breaking and that there's movement and the color, there's depth of color, and it's not a boring scene to look at. And now I'm adding a lighter mix with some white of that powder blue and some white. Because we're getting near, now I'm starting to build up these final touches on these. And start really getting the shape and definition. And where things aren't perfect, the way the human brain works in our eye, we will fill in a lot of missing things. You don't have to have perfect detail. As a matter of fact, paintings that are a little bit have the expression and these broader strokes, or these little strokes with texture and stuff like that, our brain will fill in the detail. It's like when you see in watercolor or gouache and stuff, these looser styles, they don't paint every single leaf on the branch. It's just a dark background, and then they layer it up, going lighter and stuff, and highlights on certain things to give it that dimension. And let your brain fill in the rest. And that actually makes a painting more like interactive for the viewer. Although I'm not putting down these realist painters that can be so realistic, the animals and eyes and everything, it's gorgeous painting. It really is. But for me right now, and in this video, in this painting, we're painting rather loosely. And just kind of getting our shapes in, not expecting anything perfect. We're just having some fun, experimenting. And seeing what we can do with this water. And learning. There's a lot of things you'll take along the way. Like that sky, for instance. That's more of a stormy sky. It is driving me... It's driving me crazy right now, but I just want to work down here for right now. I've got to get these light values in before I mess with anything else in the painting. And I'm just kind of tapping. And I do let the brush is pretty dry. I'm just grabbing some paint barely on the tips, not big bad strokes. And the paintbrush is not super loaded because I just want like these little dots. Because the water gets kind of spray here. So you'll have it where it's splashing and you get like these little dots. And I'm just going to go in and fill in those and just the tip of the brush. And the drier the brush gets, it starts to separate a little bit. And I'm still just adding in a little bit more of these foam spots and where I think a highlight should go. Technically, I'm kind of fussing with it, but I'm just learning here. Adding in some more of this little bits, tap, tap. See? It's still that same shadow blue or powder blue. I just read it and I just tap, tap, tapping. Later on, I will go in with white. And once you put the white on there, it'll really pop, especially after you have all your darks and your mid-tones in there. And just a little here and there. I'm kind of back and forth. If I think there might need to be a darker spot again, I'll go in and add some more dark. And I'm moving some light around. And if I want it to mix more, I just wet my brush a little bit and it pulls up the paint underneath and will blend better. And I'm not using hard pressure. I'm gently tapping with the brush. If you use too hard a pressure, you will pull up all the paint, especially if your paint brush is really wet or it's a hard brush. This is actually a very soft nylon brush. So here, still building up these lights. This is not white yet. It's still that powder blue. It just looks white against the darker background. And I know I want a lot of motion here. In the center is where the two waves are kind of crashing together. And just painting. Moving up because now I'm really working on that direction of the water and the motion here, just adding some life. No, I wanted a little bit more dark in there, just using the edge of the brush. The light is coming in from my west window and it's a little bit, it's not the best light that I like to work in, and we have an overcast day. It's getting ready to rain again. Normally I like to paint in the sunroom because it's got that northern light and everything, but it's just too hot down there right now. So we're in here in the air conditioning. Not the best light. So I apologize about it being a little bit darker. And now just working on some of the little splashes. I will, at the end, I will use a spatter to get those splashes and droplets of water that come with that breaking wave. But we won't do that until the end of the painting. So now I'm building up this color, this wave again. I'm adding some yellow. And now it's really starting to show some definition. Now you can finally start seeing some of the shape of that wave. This is where we start to move out of the ugly stage and into, wow, this actually looks like water. And I know I'm going to go in a lot lighter here. I'm just trying, I like to build up slowly and layer the colors. That way I don't accidentally put too much, and then at the end I can use just a thicker stroke of yellow that's not mixed in with anything, just for some highlight spots and add a little bit more pop. Now we're going to add some down here. See, that was a thicker yellow. And we're just bringing in that motion and the reflections of light. I'm not completely sure about the center part. I still want it to have a little bit more light and motion to it. And I'm kind of working out in my brain. This is where a reference picture or a reference photo can be a lot more helpful than when you're trying to do something out of your imagination. So I've lost a little bit of my shadows here in some places, and I'm going to go in and darken these up just to make those lights pop a little bit more now and add even more depth and dimension to these waves. And give a little bit more shape. Again, I'm just using the ultramarine blue here. And going along and letting it, I'm dragging it up in a little bit of streaks too, using the side of the brush. Not blending as much, letting those lines show as it mixes with the rest of the paint. Kind of differentiating behind the foam and the water. Okay, so now I'm just going to go in, I'm going to start darkening some darker areas to find these waves, especially under the white caps there. And just slowly build it up. Reestablishing some darks here. I went my brush so that I could blend it out a little bit more. Now I really want to start showing some of the shape and the motion of the water over on this side. And I realize this video may be a little bit too fussy for a brand new beginner. I will do another one with a simpler seascape that doesn't have as much of the dark and light going back and forth throughout the painting. Something a lot easier to paint for somebody really, really brand new. And now I'm defining under those caps again, on it darker. And we are getting close to being done here, where I'll add some of the final colors and highlights, I think. I think I'm about done with this bottom part. Just looking at it, I know I want to use some more cyan in that middle ground. So I will probably do that because I need this wave to be separated from the middle ground. And it's not the white cap up above. Even if I added white, would still blend in too much. I'm still kind of blending these in just to get the shape that I want. I will go in with thicker paint here in a minute. Just want to make sure I've got some of this motion of where the water is going on this side. I do like the other side better, but I don't want it completely the same. And as you can see, my brush is pretty dry. So as I go along, it leaves little streaks and lines there. It's not all blending together because that's the effect I want. I want some of the color striating into that aqua and the whites. Okay, so let's bring in, I'm using that powder blue again. It's just kind of going underneath, and some ultramarine. I want to define these shapes underneath this cap just a little bit more, and some darker values. And I'm just kind of dry brushing it underneath. The paint's still wet underneath, so it does still mix into those aquas and the whites that or not white, that powder blue that I laid down, and some of the yellow. And we're just slowly dragging this through to kind of give some direction to this wave. And we're done fiddling with all that. We're going to rinse off our brush. Maybe blend this a little bit more. Yeah. I think we'll blend it a little bit more with the wet brush. And pull some of that color down into it. I think it's set, and we are about ready to go in with some white soon. That's our final color there. I'm mussing and fussing here with little different areas. But yeah, I think it's time to go in with the lights now. I do want this area to be rather light. I'm going to add some yellow. I want a little bit more of that glow, that more sea green color. I want this to glow right where the water is the thinnest. So I'm adding some yellow here. We're just highlighting. This is where the wave, as it's coming up into the air, more light is shining through it. So it's going to be lighter than the rest of it, the blues around. So this is what is going to give it kind of that height. And then we'll probably add some little bolder strokes. And go down the center here. And this is that powder blue. I'm not using white yet. I'm still trying to bring up with the lighter values as much as I can before going to the complete white, because you can't go lighter than white. At least not in any paints I've used. I'm just kind of shaping this again. I wanted it to look like it was crashing together here. I'm still not sure I'm accomplishing that, but we're going to leave it alone and then start building in our whites now, our final highlights. I do know that middle ground we're going to work on a little bit more as soon as we get the waves down here at the bottom done. Now it is dry now, and the white. Now remember in the beginning I told you that that yellowish stuff sitting on top, that's just the Arabic gum, the binder, and nothing's wrong with the paint. I have a palette brush and I'm going to mix it up and it'll be fine. So you can take a palette brush, a toothpick. Normally I use a toothpick because they're easier to clean off. You don't waste a lot of paint. But here I'm just going to use a small palette knife and mix all this white, that gum Arabic, back into the paint. And just mix it really slow, kind of back and forth, pull it to the underneath. And you do want to mix that binder in. You don't want to just drain it off the top, because that's what is part of the paint, and it's what keeps it together. Otherwise, when it dries, you're not going to have that binder, and it may end up too chalky. It could peel, so you just kind of want to mix that back in there. And you can either scrape it off in there, pull the tube out, but I don't feel like doing that. And I know I'm going to be using my white for splatter later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe the back edge off there, but I can't get it all the way this palette is. So I'm going to take the other palette that came with it, and I'm just going to scrape off my paint on there, because I do know that I'm going to be using white watered down for the splatter, for the splash at the end. So I just scrape it off here. And get the dog hair. I have German Shepherds and a woolly husky, so we get dog fur everywhere. Pull that out and then just clean off my palette brush, which with watercolor or with gouache, you can leave it and then you just put it in water. It'll wash off pretty good. It's not like if you're using acrylic or oil and it dries on there and you have a problem. You won't be able to get that paint off, not without a remover of some sort. All right, so let's get into adding the white. And are you ready to actually see this start going from the ugly stage and into where it starts to pop and really look like water and look alive and look like we didn't completely waste our time? This is the magic, the lights going in here, going across the top. And I am literally just kind of rolling the brush and using the corner of it, the edges, and making like little dots. And I'm making the dots now because I know I can go in and I will smooth some of it out, but I still want some of that texture. But I don't want it to be completely polka dotted. And I'm just going along, and where the wave is breaking, where all the foam would be, I'm just kind of dotting it in. And some of it is like little lines. I turn the brush and going along like right here. And others I'm just kind of dotting. And I'm working on that middle ground a little bit. As I went across, I noticed it's not dark enough. And now that I'm using the white against it, I can still tell I'm going to need to go in with more cyan and deepen up that color. But we're already committed here. We're using the white, so we're going to finish this wave. And I'm just going to go along the very tippy tops of where extra light would be hitting and where you'd get those reflections and your brightest highlights, and just kind of dotting it on there. And then I drag it a little bit. just to give that texture. And you don't want to put it across everywhere, and you don't want it super bright everywhere. Just where like the sun to kind of bring out the tops of these waves and show height. Because the darker blues are going to recede and lighter values are going to bring it up closer to you. And so now we're going to start seeing some depth build and some shape here, and it's starting to look like a wave that's crashed. I think this is probably sometimes my favorite part, just these little finishing touches and getting those highlights in there, because they really just make the painting pop. And that's why we go in with darker values first and then work up to that white. And now I'm just adding a little bit of shade here. Or light might be hitting this wave and making it a little bit more translucent. And we're still just continuing to build up these highlights. And coming underneath a little bit. Dragging some of that white down. And coming up under here again, just to show some more depth to that wave. Lighters and the lights and darks. And again with the white, just little splatters, just little highlights everywhere where it would be the highest and getting the most reflection and light. And I'm not loading a lot of paint, and that paint is not really thick, but it's not watered down. You don't want to use too wet of a brush, otherwise it will blend out and you won't get like those little dots for your highlights. And here, this is a big portion of water with a lot of foam where they're meeting and crashing together, and I want to highlight this more and bring out more white along here so that that yellow will pop a little bit more. And this is a taller part than the rest of the water there, so it brings it closer to the viewer. And while I still have white on the brush and it's lighter, it's a little bit less white than what was on it, and it's kind of muted down, I mix it a little bit with the blue where I see spots that I think I might want a little bit more light. At this point, it's just intuition. There's no real rhyme or reason. I promise my process. This craziness does lead to an actual decent painting at the end. It must be crazy to watch. But if you're ADHD like me, then you probably completely understand. I am a person that just never, sometimes I just can't. I see something and I'm like, nope, I need to change it. And if I don't, I'll forget about it. And then when I'm all done and I think I've been done with the picture, then I see it and I'm like, oh, I was going to fix that. So now I'm just finishing up pulling out these whites. The brush is drier. There's not a lot of water on it. You can see the bristles are kind of separated there. And now I'm just pulling it along as it would look on a wave. If you've looked at any pictures or you're familiar with the ocean, you know that foam kind of spreads down there and lightens up the top of the crest where the waves hit and the light's hitting it. And I'm grabbing a little bit more white here, very lightly, and continuing to build up across the top of the wave. And adding in little dots where it was folding over. And this isn't like a giant surfer wave or anything like that. That would be a completely different, it's not the big roll. This is just a little rough sea here. Just one wave cresting. I'm just bringing down those little trails of white like you see as the foam goes through. Now I'm going to work out this other side a little bit. Just really lightly. As you can see, the brush is pretty dry. I'm just getting a little bit of highlights there. There you go. See? The bristles are spread apart. And that's because I don't have a really wet brush. I have more paint on that brush than water. Because I like the texture. If you see how it drags across, you get that kind of scumbling look. And you can do the same thing in watercolor on just a white background if you wanted to scumble some paint across and get that dry brush effect. It's really pretty. It's a great effect, and you can even do it on gouache here if it was completely dry, and then take your white and go across, or any other color, and just kind of scumble it across. And it's just called dry brush, which means your paintbrush is not soaked with water. There's more paint. The paint is thicker. I'm just continuing to build and drag this out a little bit and give a little bit more depth to this wave and the water here. Make it glow a little bit more. And this is actually really a lot of fun to paint. I avoided seascapes for so long just out of fear. And there's another thing. It may not be a masterpiece, but you should still try them. Don't do like I did and say, oh no, I'm definitely not a seascape artist, and give it up for years and then not try it again. Because you never know. Maybe, try it later, because maybe it's just skills, and as you come along, when you're working with values, things get easier and you understand how to get the shapes in there. And now I'm just pulling down a little bit more just because I want to show the direction of this water here in these darks. And I did add a little bit of water to my brush, so it is mixing with that blue underneath. That's why it's not a stark white. Gouache is a lot of fun, especially starting out, because you can make mistakes and correct them easily and just play around with the colors. And gouache is not expensive either. Neither are basic watercolors. But you can really get in there. Landscapes with gouache are fun, even like fantasy, or it's just a fun medium. I don't know if I have a favorite. It just depends on my mood, actually, the medium that I want to use or what I have envisioned in my head. Oh, I think that would look way cool in oil pastels, or oh no, I need to do that in gouache. I don't want it to be really glossy or like an acrylic would be. Or I just want more time to play, which gouache allows. Gouache is actually a very forgiving medium. Acrylic dries really fast. Gouache does dry fast in warmer weather, but you can still re-wet it. Whereas with acrylic, you cannot. Now there is a new gouache, it's called Acrylic Gouache. And it's acrylic paint actually, but it stays matte like gouache does. And I haven't tried it yet. I have a couple little tubes that came in a sketch box, and I want to try it. But I've heard that it's quite a learning curve with that one, and it is harder to get used to. So that's got to be on a day when I can work fast before it dries, and I don't feel like I'll get aggravated as much. Now I'm going in, building these whites up here in the cap, and adding some darker and pulling this down some, because I do want to start separating that from that middle ground there. And now that I've got the whites in, it does kind of take from it. I realize I want some more glow, so I'm going to add some more of this light yellow in here. It's really watered down. It's a very thin wash, and I'm very lightly going across because I don't want to pull up too much of that blue. And I'm actually going over the whites. I did pause the video and let some of that white dry, and I'm pulling across it so I didn't pull it up too much. But I wanted a little bit more pop of the color there. And I'm going to add some under the waves here again. I'm going to lighten up some of that. It's just a little bit too dark in there. To add a little bit more depth again. Now I'm just doing some finishing touches where I think the white is a little bit too bright. I'm kind of watering it down a little bit, brushing that out, blending it in better. Just some little finishing touches here and there. Again, this is personal taste. And your painting won't look exactly like mine. It's probably going to look better, especially if you have experience with these. I'm just kind of defining some of these lines and keeping it from one blank white space here. And we're almost done with this, I think. I've got the shape that I want. It looks like water. It's really, I need to start looking at that sky and the middle ground. I'll finish them up real quick. I think we're done here on this background. Yep, time to go up here. Okay, so let's fix this sky. I'm going over it with that powder blue and a sky blue that they have and light blue. I'm using a wet brush because I do want to kind of bring up some of the paint underneath and mix these together on the paper as it goes. And remember, at your horizon is always going to be your lightest when you're looking at your sky. It's just how the atmosphere works. And it'll be darker up towards the top. So I'll add some cobalt blue up at the top and start working my way down. I will start thickening the paint here. And I'm not worried about a perfect gradient blend here. I'm going to be pulling in some really loose clouds. I'm just trying to get rid of that orange horizon line there. I don't want as much of that showing through. I'm just continuing to build up this background using that cobalt blue again. And then their light blue, which light blue is a little bit warmer color. I kind of want some variation in the sky here. And then again, I'll go along the horizon. I'm letting that dry a bit because it's mixing too much. And I paused it. And so now we're going to bring in more of that cobalt for the middle of the sky and add just a little bit darker to the top. I'm going in with thicker washes of this paint to just cover it. You can still see some of that underpainting showing through. Just a little bit of warmth to the sky. And just slowly building up these layers. So now I'm going to start going in and getting that horizon a lot lighter. That is that powder blue. And I do not have super steady hands, but I didn't feel like taping it again. If you have really steady hands, I'm so envious of you. And I'm going kind of slow here and just tracing along the bottom. Normally I would tape it, but I just didn't feel like it. And so we're just lightening up this bottom horizon and then blending it up into the top colors. And now I'm going in with that more of that powder blue color. I'm not using white and kind of defining a little bit of area where I want the clouds to be. And remember, when you're painting closer to the horizon, the clouds are always going to be longer and thinner when you start to go. And when you go up higher is when they start to get bigger and puffier, the way perspective and our eyes work. So I'm just kind of dragging along the color here. I'm going in a little bit lighter. I'm just kind of slowly dragging. It's hard to see right now, but I'm moving this along. I want it a little bit lighter going up, so I've dragged those out. The clouds are not my main focus in this painting, so I'm not really worried about a whole lot of detail here. They are part of the background there, but they're not my main focus. It is the water down there, so I don't want too much up there to take away from it. So they're just simple, just dragging out some little shapes. I'll add some highlights to the top a little bit later, but just kind of dragging out and showing that there is clouds there. But I don't want them to take over the entire scene. Again, just building up that horizon. I'm going across them now, just kind of streaking in a little bit more where those lighter, thinner clouds would be towards the bottom. And covering my horizon line. Now I didn't want so much of that orange just showing a little bit more. Going in with a little bit lighter paint here. We're just going to go with a little bit puffier clouds, a little lighter in value. It's still that blue. I have not added white yet. Put some shape. So while that sky dries the rest of the way, I'm going to go in and work on the middle ground now and try to finish that up. And what I'm using is called that spring green, and again, some shallow crab. And I just want to darken up some of that area there. And just light washes going across. I'm going across that powder blue that I had used to differentiate the waves, adding a little bit of shadow underneath. And then pulling it down and pulling it across some of that lighter, well, it looks like white, but it is powder blue. Just trying to add some more of that cyan and get that color. Pull that middle ground out more. So it's not just this big blob of white. Although hindsight, looking at it, I probably could have made this one big crest of a wave, but that is not how I envisioned it. Kind of wanted that tropical. Now, the paints start to dry up, and I use these little spray bottles. Gouache will dry out as you're out painting and everything. You just spray your palette. Same with watercolors. It re-wets just fine. And it doesn't ruin the paint or anything like that. I actually got those little spray bottles off Amazon. It was like they're $1 a piece or smaller, a big package. And then these water pens, I carry those. It makes everything portable. That way, if I don't feel like carrying water jugs around, I can use just these pens. And they come with wider brushes or narrow brushes. They're fairly cheap on Amazon, probably $6 to $10 for a whole set. And it's really convenient. You can paint while you're in the car, waiting at the doctor's office, and you don't have to worry about carrying, a cup of water around. Just a paper towel and then these brushes. They're really nice. They're convenient, make it easy to travel with. And you can keep it just in your purse. These little teeny sketchbooks that you can get, or even just scrap paper or the ACO size. Really convenient. I just keep it in here with an even smaller spray bottle, my pens, and then I've got a orange watercolor pencil in there that I use to sketch with, and because it dissolves in the water and can add an orange tone rather than pencil. Just depends on my mood. So that has dried more now. You can see the cyan has come out more. It's defining that one side better. I'm happier with that. I'm going to add some more though. I just want it to pop a little bit more, add a little bit more color up there so it's not so white. And just continuing to add in, I have added like a little bit of a darker green, really, really light wash of it though, and mixed it with that cyan color. And just kind of pulling it around. And it looks much better than that kind of stark white looking. Even though it wasn't white, it was that powder blue, but it was just a little bit too stark up there and not enough dimension. And now I'm just going in with a little bit of that ultramarine blue and cobalt, and just defining the shadows underneath some of these caps. Just really light wash and kind of blending it down into that cyan. I just want a little bit more dimension here. So now I'm just deepening it. I've got the, it's called Perfume Lily. It looks like almost a neon green. I'm just going in there to add a little bit more dimension, more color here to that cyan and the aqua colors. And it's a little bit thicker. I don't have it as watered down, so it'll show more. And again, I'm brushing across very lightly. I don't want to pull up the other paint that I've just put down. This painting is still wet. I kind of do want it to mix in a little bit with the other colors, but I don't want to lose that lighter value that I have so far. And we'll just go in, darken these up a little bit more, add some shape to that foam. And so far I'm really happy with that transition of colors. It blends in with that wave down at the bottom more. That stark white color, really light, was just not doing it. And now it's kind of separating that top of the cap of that front wave, which is what I wanted and what more of what I was seeing in my head. And that's the beauty of this paint. You can work around, work through it, add and subtract. You can go backwards. If you overpaint something light, go in with a dark. It's a wonderful paint to work with. And now that we have that middle ground, I actually really like how that turned out. Still need to bring a little bit more into the sky there and blend out that horizon maybe, but we'll work on that. But now I think it ties in together more as one whole scene. It's more cohesive. And now I'm just going in with a little bit darker. I do want it to find the top of this cap. Since I'm going to go, I'll need to go over with the highlights under white again. I do want some depth and some color of that ocean water behind it to be seen through the white. And I really liked how it's turning out. So now I'm just kind of shaping that front wave a little bit more, adding a darker value up here. And there are no rules that once you added your darks and your midtones that you can't go back in and darken them up more or lighten them up. Just some mediums, it's a little bit harder to do. Watercolor, you would not be able to go back and forth as much as you do like with this gouache. So I have more of that separation that I want. Working into this a little bit more, getting that other side, dragging it into that white. Because since I'm going to be going over with the white again, I do not need that to be a different value. Otherwise, the white's not going to show up. And since I did go in and change some of that middle ground, I do need to pull this back together and rework this a little bit. And once again, this is where a reference photo is actually really helpful, because you can look at an actual wave and not just your memory of waves and how you think they should look and how they actually look. But this is just for practice and relaxation and experimentation. Okay, so we're going to go back in with the white and go over this just a little bit. I've actually got some yellow there mixed with the white, and I'm just kind of blending in that darker blue that I put there. A little bit more pops of color when I pop the white over it. Just a little bit more dimension peeking through. I'm just going to rinse off our brush now. Make sure it's clean because I don't want the other colors to mix with the white. I've gotten all this. I may add some more highlights there. I'm not sure. I do like how it ties together. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more of that yellow. With all that cyan up in the middle ground, I think it'll pop a little bit more here. Yeah. Tie this all in again. And I am going over some of that white, tone that down, and pull this around. All right, and now I'm just going to add back in some lighter. I'm using a powder blue, not white. And now I'm going to go in and we're going to use white. And I'm leaving it on the tip of the brush as kind of like a roll there, and then kind of flattening out, just barely brushing it across because I do want the texture and to see some of those strokes. And then tapping in different spots, rolling my brush, pulling some out, just random brush strokes here, but you do want to keep them kind of level with the horizon, and just little taps. I'm flipping the paintbrush over to get more of the white that hasn't gotten any of the blue in it. I'm going and get more, and we're just tapping, getting those highlights in there. You see? And just lightly dragging a corner or an edge and then pressing down in some spots if I want more to show. And I added those values there because I knew that I was done with my foreground. I may mess with that sky a little bit more. I'm just not sure yet. I want to finish out this part, and then we're going to get these white caps going on the top of this wave once I've got all those other ones done. And just going back in and adding where this light is, where the sun would be coming across. It's going to be lighter along the middle, highlights where the sun hits. And remember, the further away you get, the less detail it's going to be, the less separation. They'll look like very, very faint little lines out towards the horizon as you go into that darker blue. So it's just really faint, just kind of going across. And then I'm fixing where a little bit too much orange was still showing there. For me, I wanted it to tie in. So looking at it, I do want to fix that sky a little bit. That's just me. You could leave it like that if you wanted. Going in here with some white, and I will smooth that out. Just want some basic shades. I'm not going for anything perfection. Clouds are not what this painting is about. I do kind of want to tie into the mood and theme of the painting here. So just really light, just some little puffy puffs. And then again, grabbing some of that white. And we're going to go along the horizon here. And remember, closest to the horizon, the clouds are longer and thinner, and they're closer together. And then as you get up towards the top of the sky, there is where you start getting the puffy ones, and they're further distanced apart, and they're bigger and look closer to you. And I'm happy with the clouds the way they are. And now I'm just going to go in and define the light source here a little bit. It is just midday. There's no sunset or sunrise, so I didn't add those orangey colors or anything like that. And I'm just brightening up here where the sun, you see that light. If you've been out on those really, really blue sky days, particularly during the winter, where the sun just looks like this white round globe up there, something like that, but just hidden behind the clouds there. Just kind of bringing up so we can see where the light's coming from. This wasn't necessary, but I just wanted to add a little bit more. And then we'll go along the bottom there and spread that out across that horizon line real light, just little tippy taps so it looks like highlights on the water to show that it's not completely flat. This isn't a still lake or anything like that. And now we're going to finish up this wave and be about done with this painting. And I'm using thicker paint here. I have a lot more on my paintbrush. I do have some water there, and see just big bold strokes there, and just dropping it in. This is the big crashing part. And I don't want it all blended in, but I do want to see like bigger, bolder strokes here. Big pieces of foam. And so I'm just going in, and I'm going to do that along both sides. I'm going to tap in on spots to bring back some of that, and then just go along, bring back in some of that little bit of foam in the bubbles where it happens. I did go in and darken this up quite a bit, and then just some more strokes. And I still have that wave separation from the middle ground now because I darkened that. And we're just finishing this up, building into this middle, dragging some down, moving the paint around, keeping some of those dark highlights there. And going with some more white, and we're going to work on this center part where the waves kind of meet together and crash. And talking to yourself while doing a very long painting is really actually strange. I'm running out of things to talk about because, you know, you do some of the same things over and over and you don't want to keep repeating it. I think maybe a live would be easier where you have some interaction. And now we're at the final stages of the painting. I'm just mixed up a very watery white with the white gouache, and I put it on the brush, and then I take another brush and I just kind of tap it on there. You can use a toothbrush or anything like that and just kind of take your finger across the bristles. But I like doing this way more with the brush. And we've got our spatter that looks like the little water droplets. And now we're going to sign it. We're done, and we're coming up to the very best part aside from being finished. And I'm using an acrylic pen. It's not working very well for me right now. Don't know why. But you can use paint, a liner brush with some of that watered down white. And now we're going to peel the tape. And the tape you want to peel very carefully and make sure it's level with the painting. And just pull real slow so that you're not ripping up your paper. Especially if you work with anything that has water base in it. Sometimes it can get under and the paper gets softer, and you can damage it if you tear too fast. This tape is actually really good. You can also use that blue painter's tape. That works really well too. I'm just using the artist tape because I can see through those borders where my lines are. Washi tape comes off really good too, but just pull it off very slowly. And then reveal your clean white borders, hopefully. Sometimes you get plate that bleeds through, but that's okay. You can fix it with a white acrylic pen or even the white gouache. And we're just slowly going across the top here. It's sticking to the glue on the pad, and I thought it was paper, but it's just the glue on the pad. And there we go. We are done. And here's our final piece. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.